The first Sunday of football is completed and it was amazing. It was great to have football back. I'm going to start off with talking about the Sunday night football game, which, by the way, is that the greatest comeback of all time because the Bills were down, what, two, three scores with about 4 or 5 minutes remaining. But not only did they find a way to get themselves back into the game, they won the whole damn thing. Now, when it comes to a comeback, there also has to be some form of a collapse. This time, it was unfortunately the Baltimore Ravens yet again. And I saw something on, I think, Instagram or maybe Twitter that said this was the 17th double-digit lead that the Ravens have lost since Harbaugh has been the coach. That's a bit concerning, but to get back to this game, I want to paint the picture for those who unfortunately missed a great game. Essentially, the Ravens had this game in the bag. They have the ball, what about maybe 3, maybe 4 minutes left. Derrick Henry, who was dominant all night long, unfortunately fumbles the ball, and that leads to a touchdown drive from the Buffalo Bills. And the backlash is going to say that Derrick Henry lost his game for his team, and I've seen him take accountability for the loss. Yes, his fumble plays a role, but I'm looking more primarily at this defense because all offseason long, I was saying, oh, the defense looks like it's going to be better, especially in the secondary. We know that they can stop the run, and they were able to stop the run. I thought it was difficult for James Cook to get going most of the night. His one big explosive play came off of a pass where he almost scored a touchdown. I think he got tackled at the 1 yard line. You saw Josh Allen, as soon as he was able to get out of that pocket and cause some havoc with his legs, that led to broken plays down the secondary, which led to big explosive plays. And that was ultimately the downfall for the Ravens in that defense. Yes, they gave up over 500 yards of offense, but in tandem, as I just said, their run defense was good. Yeah, they gave up some 10-plus yard runs to Josh Allen, but that's just Josh Allen. He does that to any defense, any time of the year. What made it more impactful, though, was the fact that he was able to cause havoc in the passing game as well from using his legs. All right, I'm not going to lie. I did something dumb. I was recording the wrong stuff. So for the rest of the video, it's going to be very summarized points. Let me conclude my Baltimore and Buffalo game thoughts. Moving forward, both of these teams should care more about having postseason success. Whatever happens in the regular season is kind of whatever. For them to consider a year being successful is reaching the Super Bowl and hopefully winning it. And they have the quarterback talent. Now, in the case for Baltimore, a secondary I thought was improved, and I talked about it a lot during the summer. They got to go back to the drawing board. They need to figure out how to stop giving up so many big plays. If they can do that as the season progresses, I like their chances of reaching the Super Bowl. On to the Pittsburgh Steelers and New York Jets game. That was a fantastic game. I didn't expect it to be much of a shootout. That was pretty crazy. Let me get into Justin Fields. And I know I could be considered an apologist for him, but he looked so good yesterday. He was not only dynamic as a runner, but as a passer as well. And what I liked in particular was the fact that he didn't give up back-breaking sacks on top of not turning the ball over. Those have been two of the biggest problems for Justin Fields' game, and he showed, at least in week 1, that he has that corrected. Now, going forward, that has to be a consistent part of his game. Also, in that Jets offense, I want to give some credit to Breece Hall, who was getting flamed and question marked throughout the summer and leading into week 1. Was he going to lose his job? Was he not that bona fide stud as we all thought he was? Well, he came into this game and he had all the answers for all the questions we had. He balled out. And although he did find himself in the end zone, he definitely gave the Jets an opportunity to win this game. Also want to get into Garrett Wilson. Yes, he did have a bad drop after getting popped by Jalen Ramsey at the end of the game. I'm not going to lie. If that was any one of us, we for sure would have dropped the ball too. So I'm not going to knock Garrett Wilson for it. One positive coming out of this game involving Wilson, I love the chemistry that he has with Justin Fields. They have history playing at the Ohio State together. So expect that duo to be one of the better duos in football this year. On to the Pittsburgh Steelers side of things, let me give Aaron Rodgers his flowers because I ain't going to lie. I kind of roll him off going into this year. I'm like, I'm not really too high on the Steelers. I don't see how a lot of people have them as deep postseason contenders. To me, I wasn't really seeing it. Nonetheless, Aaron Rodgers balled out, and he kind of showed his old prime form. Now, he doesn't really have the mobility, so that's a bit of a concern, which I'll touch on a little bit. But he was wheeling and dealing. He was throwing dots across the field, and he had that passing game in a rhythm we haven't seen since Big Ben retired. Now, going back to the mobility issue, he's not as mobile as he used to be, where he can get out of pressure, he can extend plays, find players down the field. That's not going to be the case anymore. Not as often as we're used to seeing from Aaron Rodgers. The offensive line out in Pittsburgh is going to have to be better. They gave up 4 sacks on top of not really creating enough rushing lanes. I believe the Steelers have 53 yards on plus 20 carries. That's not going to get the job done, especially when you go up against some of the better teams in the AFC. And going into the year, the offensive line was the biggest question mark. Hopefully, as the season progresses, that young unit can start gelling together and start being able to have an impact on these games in a positive manner. And as for that Steelers defense, they didn't have a great performance at all. I thought uncharacteristically they gave up a lot in the running game. Nonetheless, I think they're going to be fine, and they'll find a way for all those new pieces to gel together. On to the next game. I want to talk about the Lions and Packers. That was an interesting game because I didn't think it was going to be such a one-sided affair. That Packers defense showed why getting Micah Parsons put them over the top, because they put the Lions in jail, essentially. They weren't able to run the ball, even having one of the most dynamic 1-2 punches in the game. They weren't able to have those explosive plays we're accustomed to seeing from them. St. Brown was held in check. J-Mo was held in check. The wide receiver Tesla, he had a phenomenal catch. Unfortunately, it was during garbage time, so not going to really remember it. He's going to remember it because he's a rookie. That was his first touchdown catch, so he'll remember that for his life. But other than that, the Packers looked every bit of a Super Bowl contender in this game. The first half, I love what I saw from that offense. They were able to get into a rhythm. They dominated. They put points on the board every single drive, it felt like. And most importantly, we saw Jordan Love look like the MVP he could have been last season if he didn't get hurt in the beginning. Moving forward, this offense has to be consistent. If that unit, along with Jordan Love, can remain as dominant as they were in week 1, this is going to be a championship unit. And on the Lions side of things, I thought they got dominated. They did not look like the Detroit of the last 2 seasons. Offensively, that line was not as dominant and as physical as we're accustomed to seeing. And that's a bit concerning because their center, Ragnow, he did retire during the course of the offseason. And I didn't highlight it when I was reviewing them this past summer. But that definitely was a major loss, and it seems like it's going to have an impact going forward. Also, don't want to forget the fact that they have a new offensive coordinator. That definitely played an impact on this game. There should be a couple of low periods for this unit. They got to get accustomed to the new philosophies and being able to communicate with the new OC. So expect there to be some slow starts early on. But for the most part, I'm not too concerned about that unit. I think they will be fine. And although they got mollywopped in week 1, I expect them to be in the thick of things later on as the season progresses. Let's get into the defense for the Detroit Lions. They did not look particularly strong in that first half. Now, second half, I felt they kind of cleaned up some things, but also at the same time, I felt Green Bay got a little too comfortable with the game and the score, and that allowed them to look a little bit better. They need another pass rusher opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. And for Hutch, I don't expect him to be in peak form. We need to see him get reacclimated to the game. He's coming off of a really bad leg injury, so it's going to take him some time to get into form. It's going to be a long season if this team struggles to get after the quarterback, because the secondary, for as talented as they are individually, they need that pass rush to make their lives easier. So we'll see how that goes. I thought they should have re-signed Zadarius Smith. He signed with the Eagles Friday after their opening day game against the Cowboys. And lastly, I want to talk about the Miami Dolphins, who looked absolutely horrific. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They looked bad. They looked unmotivated. They looked outcoached. They looked like they didn't even want to play football that day, if we're being honest. I didn't want to jump on this bandwagon because I thought Mike McDaniels was a good coach. I know he hasn't been able to position the Dolphins to win big-time games, But yesterday was almost like a nail in the coffin for his coaching tenure out in Miami. I would be surprised if he gets the boot before the end of the season. That being, I'll get into that a little bit later. But man, the vibes in Miami just don't look right. And that starts with Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill doesn't want to be there. It's plain and simple. I think at some point they're going to have some serious conversations about trading him and what they could get for him, because that relationship could benefit from both sides going their separate ways. Let's talk about Tua. He had 3 turnovers in this game. Very concerning. For the future in Miami, there needs to be legitimate questions about whether or not Tua is that franchise quarterback. Health has played a significant role in that questioning of Tua, because he's missed so many games. And then on top of that, he hasn't been great in those prime time games for Miami. So is he the undoubtable franchise quarterback out in Miami? And I know that's probably extreme considering this is just week 1, but that's how bad the Dolphins looked in this game. Now, the one problem, if you do try to move on from Tua, is that you're paying him a ton of money. I'm not sure if any team's going to be willing to take that on because of Tua's injury history, along with the fact that Tua is a talented quarterback, but he just has not shown up for those gotta have it moments. And similar to Mike McDaniels, there could be some discussions about whether or not to move forward with Tua as your quarterback. Looking ahead, the Dolphins' next 3 games are going to be at home against New England, on the road against the Buffalo Bills in primetime, and then they come back in another primetime game against the New York Jets. If they go 0-4 in that stretch, would not be surprised if we see a significant change out in Miami. That's going to wrap up this video. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Would have had this out sooner. By the time this comes out, it's probably going to be Monday Night Football. So my pick for that game is going to be the Chicago Bears. I already said that in some of my social media posts. So if you don't follow, link in the description below. Thank you if you made it to the end of the video. Much appreciated. Don't forget to leave a like, comment your week 1 takeaway. Most importantly, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you all in the next one.